everybody, I'm Nicole.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Sarah, and together we're the co-founders of Whale Tales, a living library of cetacean stories.
Today we have more special guests.
So sit back and enjoy as we dive right in.
Today we have had the pleasure of talking to Cindy and Kat from PacMam, aka Pacific Mammal Research, which is an organization dedicated to understanding more about the marine mammal populations in the Salish Sea and passing on that knowledge through scientific publications and education. Right up our alley.
Dr. Cindy Elliser is the founder and research director, and Katrina, or Kat White, is the co-founder and assistant research director.
We're super excited to talk to them and have you get to listen to our conversation about their research, especially about Harbour porpoises in the Salish Sea, and maybe we might nerd out about porpoises in general, because we haven't done that in a while. So,
Indeed.
Let's get to it. Okay, now we're here with Cindy and Kat from PacMam, not PacMan. I did try to email Cindy from at PacMan. I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. And speaking of Google, as we were talking about before we recorded, Google sent me like 7 emails afterwards. It was like, this person can't be reached. You can't email this person. So, PacMam, as in mammal. Pacific Mammal.
We were hoping that, like, if we might get some side people. Like, they're like, oh, they put in PacMam, but they accidentally hit the M, and then they found us. So
Yeah, that's very smart SEO. Okay, so to start, why don't you tell us about PacMam, Pacific Mammal Research, and the work that you guys do there.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for having us. We're always happy to talk about, especially porpoises.
Yeah.
They don't get as much attention as they should. But we started PacMam back in 2014. I moved out here from Florida, and Kat came over, from Shetland via New York. And I decided I wanted to start a nonprofit, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to do it with me?" And she's like, "Yeah, let's do it." Okay, and that's how we started. And so we started a little like 11 years ago now. 10 years was when we officially started in October of 2014. So we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And we focus on harbor porpoises and harbor seals, but we don't exclude any marine mammals. If they come through our study site, we document them and share with other organizations. But our main thing is harbor porpoises and harbor seals. And my previous work is in the Bahamas with Dr. Denise Herzing and the Wild Dolphin Project. And so I was all about photo ID, and looking at social structure was really my kind of passion. And so I was like, can we do photo ID with porpoises? Has that happened?
Yeah.
Has it been tried? And Kat had background in photo ID as well, and so that's kind of what drew us together. And it was funny because when we first started, I would tell people what we were doing. You know, we'd be going to workshops or whatever, and I'd be like, "Oh, we're doing photo ID on harbor porpoises," and people would just laugh. By the way, they're like, "Sure, you are." Wait, really? So, because it is very difficult to do with them just because of the way they are. But yeah, so we do a lot of different things. We basically try to learn as much as we can about the population. We are primarily land-based in Anacortes. So our little study site is Burroughs Pass. So if anybody's been this way and been out to Washington Park, that's the water that you're overlooking. When you go to that overlook, that's our study site. And if you see people down below on a little rocky outcropping with a big camera, that's us. We're out there 2 to 3 days a week, year-round, even when it's really, really cold. And just try to learn as much as we can. And we've learned, I think a lot of times people don't see the benefit of long-term monitoring, right? We don't know a lot about their populations. And the only way we're going to learn about them is sitting out there and watching, right? We
Absolutely.
know a lot about the orcas because people have sat out there and watched.
Yep. Yeah. And about the dolphins, in the Bahamas and other bottlenose dolphins, that's the thing we talk about it a lot on this podcast. There's so many cetaceans that we know so well, and so many that we know nothing about. And harbor porpoises is definitely on the lower side of that, which you wouldn't expect because they're, especially here, they're so, and also there's harbor porpoises here, but.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like the ones that we don't know a lot about, it's because they live miles and miles offshore, and and they're really hard to get to. It's like these are literally
Right here. Yeah.
right here. And, I like to say that if you go out on the boat, you're more likely to see a harbor porpoise or a harbor seal than you are any other marine mammal. I mean, they're around. So it was mind-blowing that we didn't know much at all about this species with them being so close. So, yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what we do.
And now you had a paper recently, the site fidelity paper. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so, and Kat, feel free to chime in anytime here if I forget something really good and juicy. But I just gave a presentation earlier today at the Marine Mammal Work Group that I'm on, and so I'm just playing my slideshow so I remember all the cool things to talk about. But, so we did a paper about 3 years after we started, basically showing that you could do it. We did have matches with Harbour porpoises then. And so this is kind of the update to that paper of, yes, you can do it, and you can do it over 11 years. So one of the coolest things from that is the fact that we have individuals that we've seen, one individual in particular we've seen 125 times over the last 8 years.
That's insane.
Actually, more like 7 years, because this year's going to be 8. We just saw her, but yeah, her name is Pointer. She's our poster child of porpoises. She loves to be photographed and is around a lot. So oftentimes with our social media, she'll be one of the ones in the pictures because we got some good pictures of her. But so we've seen the majority of them we see more than once. We have 11 years of site fidelity. So we have an individual that we've known, since 2014 and that we see fairly consistently. And it's fascinating because we only know of one other group in the world that has data like this on Harbour porpoises. There's another group in the Netherlands that has, I think it was 14 years of site fidelity.
It was 14, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's just because people haven't been out there looking, So 11 years of site fidelity. And we see them year-round, although in the summer they go somewhere else. They are here. We still see them some, but it's definitely a striking difference. They go somewhere else to do, we don't know what yet.
Secret porpoise things.
Secret porpoise party is what's happening, I think, somewhere.
Fun to see.
Secret porpoise party?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it would be probably X-rated.
We'll
get to
These
that.
are Harbour porpoises we're talking about, yeah.
Yes, they are. Their mating is very unique. But the other cool thing that we saw was natal philopetry. So we have calves that we know from some of the females that are remaining here. And talk about mating. One of them, as a 5-year-old, even attempted to mate with his mom. So, not sure how often that happens, but interesting things we can find out. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other big things was that, so this long-term work allows us to learn about life history traits. So we really didn't know whether they calve yearly or bi-yearly in the Salish Sea. It would have been thought that the Atlantic was they reproduce yearly there, but in the Pacific side of things, there are more instances where they calve bi-yearly, so every other year. And so the stranding data had shown that it's likely that they could do it every year, but they couldn't say it, confirm it. And we were definitely able to confirm that they can calve consecutively. So we have individuals that have had calves 2 years in a row or 3 years in a row. And so, so we know now that at least these animals here in this portion of the Salish Sea can calve every year. So female harbor porpoises are like the bomb.
They've got a lot going on.
They can be pregnant and lactating every year of their adult life after the age of 3. Like, that's as early as they become reproductively active. And like, I've had kids.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible have to do that every single year and not have a break.
Mm-hmm. Especially with the extra special mating techniques. This is a lot of...
It's very intense. Yes.
Yeah.
And so then we see with site fidelity, we see seasonal. So again, in summer, we don't have a lot of resightings or as many. And it's mainly spring and fall. But what was really interesting is that winter, we don't have a lot of resightings. And we're like, well, that's interesting. Why is that? And then we were looking at the grouping data of when we see them, seasonal differences, and what they're doing in the past. And it is apparently like they're here, but they're traveling in winter. They just go straight through. So they're still here, but we can't get good enough pictures of them because they're just going so quickly through. We can't get good ID shots. We really need them to like play around in the pass and allow us to catch those good shots when we can. So basically, we think that they're here most of the year, except for summer is again lower, but we just can't document those resightings in winter because of their behavior.
How big is the passage?
That's a good question, and I will pull up really quickly because I can never remember the exact dimensions of it, and I don't want to say it wrong. So let me pull it up just real quick. It's not very big, so that's one of the things that when we're talking about groups of porpoises, it's really a little hard to know like who's cohesively in a group because they're just a little different than dolphins. Yeah, but in the past, it's a small enough area that they definitely are within acoustic communication, if not that. And so, most of the time, whoever's in the pass is pretty much a group because they do tend to get together. But the pass is about 1,300 meters long, with a maximum width of about 915 meters at the western edge that opens to Rosario Strait, and then 460 meters at the eastern end that gets into Burroughs Bay. So it's relatively confined, right? So we don't see really large groupings of animals here, just the smaller groups, which they're generally in groups of less than 3. Yeah. Let's see, but and then we had the mini. Oh, and then the other cool thing is that we have a 3-generation family of Harbour Porpoises.
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
It's really cool. So Piano, who's the one that we saw in 2014, she had a calf Piccolo in 2017, and then we didn't see her for Piccolo for a while, and it was really exciting to make that match because we hadn't seen her for years. And then I come up and I was like, I emailed it to Kat. I was like, I really think this is the same animal. Please confirm with me. She's like, yeah. So that was her calf. And then in 2023, both Piano and Piccolo had babies.
Oh, wow. Sounds like Big Mama and her whole thing going on with all of her daughters and granddaughters and et cetera, et cetera.
And so imagine that too, that these guys are having calves every year. They could have their family tree.
They could just be. Well, it makes more sense then for that 5-year-old who doesn't know who am I related to? Everybody in here.
And so this thing we don't even know. Sometimes with the mating too, it looks like the female is completely surprised. So it's unclear whether either one of them knows who the one is that they're going after. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't.
Or since we're on the topic, I know that we have talked about Harbour porpoise mating on our podcast before, but it's been quite a while. And so for listeners listening to this now, rather than needing to necessarily go back through our back catalog if they don't know, would you like to tell us about what Harbour porpoise mating is like?
Yes. Yeah, it's the one flashy thing they do. So, they do some other stuff, but it's really flashy. And so what they'll oftentimes do is leap out of the water when they attempt to mate with a female. So the male will swim up and then come up and always 100% of the time on the left-hand side of the female. It is 100% lateralization, and we did some work with colleagues in San Francisco and around the world documenting in a book chapter that it's everywhere. It's not just these guys here, those guys in San Francisco. So that kind of lateralization is really unique in the mammal world for it to always be that way. But so he comes up and he leaps up and tries to get it in, and then in a second he falls down, he's spent, and they move on. And there's no precursor to it. All the pictures that we have are simply because we've been focusing on some group of animals and they happen to do it right in front of the camera. I've had one time that I saw, I was like, something weird's happening over there, and then I was able to catch it. But so it's very, very quick, to put it hopefully politely, males are very well endowed.
Was going to be my next point of topic. Yes. You don't need to put it politely. Once Nicole sang a song about cetacean sex on this podcast.
Excellent. Okay. It is very big.
We'll have the chorus in here sometimes.
So, has anybody done any research about, is it connected, the jumping and the left and the size of the stuff?
The jumping, I don't know. So the penis it goes about to their chin. It is very, very big. And so not much goes in either because, it's really, really big, right? So it's just the tip, as they say.
Amazing.
You said you sang a song about sex.
No, we did. It's
go in there.
just, I don't think that phrase has been on here yet, but I love that it is. Because this is about science,
right,
people.
exactly.
It's just what it is. It's just what it is.
This is science.
So what's interesting is, one of our colleagues, Dara Orbach, she basically does internal molds and looks at reproductive structures. So she did internal molds of both the female and the male. And side note, females have the most vaginal folds of, I believe, any mammal.
Oh my gosh.
At all.
Oh.
And so my first reaction was, that's impact resistance.
Yeah.
It's like,
That makes sense.
But the other thing about that is that what they think is that with so many folds, they can, if they just slightly turn,
then gets caught in there.
You're like, oh, I didn't like it. I turned a centimeter, and there you go. And the female, during that jump, the female almost always does like a cartwheel. Her fluke comes up and out of the water, so it's either she's trying to get away, or she was surprised, or we're still not sure. But doing those internal molds, she looked, and it literally was like a co-evolutionary arms race where the male did like this, and the female did this, and the male did this, and the female did this. And then it literally just fits together the best if they are at that entry on the left-hand side.
That's so weird.
Yes.
And just...
It's fascinating.
I don't know. It's fascinating, and just...
Yeah, why would you have to leave? Why does...
Yeah, why is that? Why does that have to do with it? I guess if that's the way it evolved as opposed to the normal way.
Yeah, because usually it's belly-belly.
I've seen hand gestures now. Yeah, the belly like that. So then it would have to be like a left-right kind of situation, like mirrors or something. I don't know.
I think with the Harbour porpoise, I think with the other thing with the leaping is a lot of times they accelerate toward the female. So the leaping itself is sometimes even just like a byproduct of how fast they're going to get to the female before she gets away.
Oh yeah.
So we've definitely seen that too, where it's like he's been accelerating and then kind of missed the chance, and still will kind of go shooting off because he was accelerating for the mating attempt and then kind of missed his opportunity. So some of it might just be that too.
Yeah, and they don't always leap, right? So there is underwater mating that happens. And although in the researchers Mark Webber and Bill Keener down at Golden Gate with the Marine Mammal Center, they are the ones that basically documented that mating behavior. And actually, it was really cool because we had got early in our studies, I had gotten pictures of them jumping out of the water, and I was like, oh my god, I got a porpoise breaching, like that's huge, it's amazing. And then we went to we had a special Harbour Porpoise working group because a similar thing happened with them there, where the Harbour Porpoises were gone and they came back, and then they were doing research down there. And so they were the ones like really that had first documented this mating behavior. And so when they started showing pictures, I was like, yeah, I think I have a picture of that. And I just didn't know what I was looking at because I just thought it was them reaching. And then every single one that we looked at that we hadn't, seen the obvious thing that the males had realized that those were mating attempts that we just didn't realize. And I think it really highlights how much the species has been ignored. Because remember, we just talked about they're all around, they're just right there. And we didn't know until like 2017 that they literally leap out of the water to mate.
Yeah, which seems like something we should have known for a while.
Somebody would have been like, whoa, that's interesting. What was that?
Yeah. Also, like, especially with, like, the known hybridization and the interactions, like, if I was a porpoise biologist, I would be studying the hybrids because that's the most fascinating thing in my mind of how this is working with harbors and dolls. And then there's been known successfully reproductive offspring, and just like, this is the thing. And now my mind is going like, how are they just now making reproductive hybrids? Like, why hasn't this been happening for thousands of years with these porpoises if this is the way that it's been doing it? And just like, I have so many questions.
It's just that they normally don't, so they can't seem to be in the same place at the same time really much, right? So if we have a lot of Harbour porpoises, we don't have dolls porpoises. And when Harbour porpoises were gone, we had tons of dolls. And so there's some level of just like they can't both be in the area, even if they have kind of separate habitats, and that the dolls like underwater.
Yeah.
But we honestly don't know how many hybrids there actually are, because there was a recent study, or relatively recent study, that showed, so usually it's the male Harbour porpoise and the female dolls, which makes sense.
Yeah, not a surprise.
Because of the Harbour porpoises. And male Dall's porpoises tend to mate guard as much as we know. We know even less about that species. So it makes sense that the male Harbour porpoise would be the one. He's like, sperm competition, I can mate with whatever, and it doesn't do anything to me. So most of the time we thought that was basically always how it was. Well, then they did some genetic studies on with I think some stranded and bicaught animals and whatnot. And they documented them morphologically and said, these are hybrids, these are not, whatever. And then when they looked at them, they had misidentified some of them at morphologically, saying that was a Harbour or that was a Dall's, and it was actually a hybrid. Because once the hybrid mates back with the original population, it dilutes the genes, and the fertile offspring don't look, they just look like kind of maybe slightly weirdo, of the species.
Yeah.
And they did find some that the Harbour porpoise was the mother. So, I don't know what these porpoises are doing.
I know. We got to get back on our hypothetical boat and do some more research.
Exactly.
Let's get our biopsy guns out there and get some
so
stuff
that's the
done.
thing. Some people are like, well, have you tried tagging them? I'm like, okay, I can barely get a picture of these guys. You want to try to tag in there? That's not gonna. And on top of that, I'm very much the research that I've done in the past. It's always non-invasive. We try to be as non-invasive as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be certainly very interesting if we could get some skin.
Yeah, find out where they're going for their secret porpoise meetings. It's obviously something to do with this.
Well, and so that's what we are trying to do, eDNA work. So
I was just going to ask.
Trying to collect DNA to be able to answer that genetic question without having to get tissues.
I think that's the super exciting direction, especially for animals that are hard to even photograph, let alone anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. We can just scoop seawater and find their cells. Yay! But again, a lot of the other animals, you can be like, there was a whale. Let me slowly go up to there and scoop some water and pour it out. And there you go. I have so many cells. Harbour porpoises, of course, are you have to get to that fluke print in 30 seconds or everything's disappeared. They just don't slough off as many cells. And you have to take twice the amount of water that you do for other animals. So once again, just very small little animal.
Very small.
Yeah, the second smallest cetacean. So,
yeah, I want to go back to what you said, because I don't know anything about this. Is you keep saying that they were gone and then they've come back.
Oh yeah,
and I don't think I know this about Salish Sea, in all of Salish Sea, southern.
So
I've missed a story.
Yeah, it's a big one
somewhere.
So in the 40s and 50s, they were everywhere. It was Harbour porpoises, and you rarely saw dolls. By the early 1990s, Harbour porpoises were all but gone. Basically gone in Puget Sound proper. There were still some in the San Juan Island areas and northern, but pretty much gone in Puget Sound. And now all you saw is dolls. So if you talk to somebody who's been on the water in the 80s and 90s, they'll tell you dolls porpoises are what we have here. But starting in the early 2000s, there was anecdotal evidence that had switched again. And then they went out and did a study in 2016, Thomas Jefferson and some other researchers, and did aerial counts and documented that, they are back. And so now all you see is Harbour porpoises, and we have very few doll sightings in the Salish Sea. And people ask, first thing is, why? And that would be great information if anybody was looking at porpoises
in the 80s and 90s
before the last 13 years.
But also, we don't know why the bigs are here in such a huge numbers, and we know more about those two ecotypes than we know about anything else. So, why are the lags back? Salish Sea, man, it's crazy.
And the humpbacks, right? The humpbacks came back too, and so
why did the humpbacks come back? Is it because the Harbour porpoises came back? Sure, I don't know.
I think the bigs came back to some degree because there's lots of seal and porpoises.
Yeah, because the Harbour porpoises came back.
But and so we just don't know, and it's likely that we stopped gill netting for the most part. There's very little of that anymore. We have tried to be better about habitat degradation and pollution and things like that for animals that are close to shore. They live within a few miles from shore their entire life, basically. And so it's probably a combination of those factors that allowed the Harbour porpoises to come back to their natal range, where they were supposed to be. So maybe the dolls only moved in because they're like, haha, nobody's here. And then the Harbour porpoises started coming back. They're like, oh, dang it. Gotta leave again.
Yeah.
It's the Harbour porpoises.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's
So many mysteries.
And then, so one of the other things I wanted to mention from the paper that we determined, so people ask how long porpoises can live. And I love that question because I'm like, 8 to 24 years. Which basically means we have no idea.
I mean, it's better than the answer when people ask how long an orca can live. Because you're like, okay, well, do you mean a female or a male?
Right.
Because if I'm just going to answer it generically, it's like 30 to 100 years.
That's true.
Also, do you mean how long did they used to live versus how long are they living now?
How long they live
Your
now.
range is much smaller.
Yeah.
Did you see the right? There was a recent right whale paper that came out showing how long they could
130 years.
130 years, and they're only living to 20 now. So it's like it's context dependent. But these guys, we don't even have that. It's just like somewhere between 8 and 24. I don't know.
It's one of you just have to sit and wait until you get to 24 and then see what happens.
Good luck.
Good luck. I like to say that the main point I try to get across to people is like they live either half or less than half the lifespan of a normal dolphin species. Like most dolphins, it's about 50 years. So they do live faster. They they have to do things faster. That's why they start reproducing at age 3 because got to get you going. But what we did find is that some of our regular females, we determined that they were adults when we first saw them, and Pianos especially because she had a calf when we first saw her in 2014. Which means that she, in particular, is at least 14 years old, and she had a calf this year.
Wow!
And then Raindrop and Pointer are both at least 10 years old, and had calves this year as well. So if we have females that are reproductively active at 10 and 14, I think the lower end of that range of like 8 to 10 may be too low for otherwise normally healthy populations, at least for these animals here. I don't know. We can't say worldwide, but we just thought that was really interesting to be able to. It was an unexpected thing. I didn't think we thought about like we'd be able to get longevity out of the work that we were doing, at least right yet.
Yeah.
But it's given some information on it, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. It's amazing what you can learn when you sit for whatever 250 days of the year. What is your average? Something like that?
Actually, we haven't done. We didn't break it down by days. Say,
that's a really good point. We try to get out like between 2 to 4 times a week year round, like as much as we possibly can. Pretty much the only time we're not out is if the weather's really terrible.
And we take 2 weeks off.
Yeah, pretty high rates. Yes, that's right.
That's when the super secret parties are happening.
We should do that.
That's probably
probably exactly when they're doing it.
Well, I had one time I had to be gone for a while, and so then I came back. I was here for a couple weeks, and every single time I went out, they weren't there. But when any of the other staff went out, they were there, and I'm like, you guys, I'm getting a complex. I'm really. And then they finally showed up. But sometimes I feel like they're like, oh, Cindy's here. Okay, go away. But yeah, it's so there's been a few other things, if you want to chat about them quickly, that we've learned by sitting out there and watching. This is one of my favorite stories to tell because it's another thing of like, wow, porpoises have been ignored and what can we learn? We actually had a colleague that had come out, and she would come out in the summers and just sit out there for like 8 hours a day and take pictures. And she sent us this picture of a porpoise with a salmon in its mouth. And I was like,
oh, isn't that the same size?
Yeah, so like salmon can get up to 2 feet long, and harbor porpoises are 5 to 5.5 feet. So considerably up to half of their body weight.
A lot, yeah.
And so my first reaction was like, you can't eat that. What do you do? Like,
yeah, that's the thing. It's half the size is like bigger than the stomach for sure.
Like, what's wrong with you? So we kind of like just sat on it for a little bit, and then I was just like, I think we should write a note. A lot of times if you don't have a full data set, you just write, hey, this was an interesting thing that happened. We think you should know about. So we were going to do that, and then we started seeing it more. Like we got our own pictures of them with salmon, and one of them we know was likely a coho salmon, and so. They're definitely trying to take them. So then we ended up talking with our friends down at the Golden Gate Bridge and asked if they had seen this with large fish. And they're like, actually, yeah, we have. But they're chasing American shad, which is an introduced species down in the about 50 or 60 years ago into the Columbia in the magnanimous, wonderful ideas of humans. Like, let's take the fish from over here and put it in there and it'll be great. So we documented that they were actually taking these large animals, and most of the time, all diet studies had shown the few that we have were shown to they didn't have salmon in their diet. That was never a thing on the Pacific side. And most of the diet is 30 centimeters or less, so less than a foot. And that's what they're normally supposed to take. So these guys are taking things that could be twice as big as they normally do. And girth-wise, like, it's quite large. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, just with the trying to chew that.
Well, and they don't even chew. They just swallow it whole.
They don't chew it, but chew it enough to get it in your mouth, to get it to your throat. Like,
yeah, and that's what we're like, can you do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
And they have to, and it's different. It's a different behavior, and it's a different prey handling, because they have to hold it and then conceivably wait for it to not be fighting anymore, and then orient it and stick it down.
Yeah, and then spready it.
Very different than eating like a herring or a hake or something. So we documented that they did that. We wrote up a paper with them, and then the next question was like, well, do you choke on that? Because it seems like you choke on that.
Yeah.
That seems like a bad thing to do. And so then we worked with colleagues in the Stranding Network from California, Oregon, and Washington, and dug into their records, and found 27 cases where they had choked on this fish, and nobody had written a note. No, like, usually if something like that happens, somebody's like, that's weird, let's write this down. And nobody did. So we wrote that paper, and because basically what happens is that the esophagus and the trachea are like on top of each other, basically. And so if the fish goes down the esophagus and pops the goose beak, the thing that connects basically the trachea to the blowhole, if it gets popped out of place and you can't get it down either way, you suffocate. You asphyxiate.
Yeah.
So we looked through that, and what's really fascinating is that 92% of the animals were female. We only had one male that we when we sexed most of them. There was dead porpoises. There was the people in the Stranding Network that did that. So it was 92% females, and close to 87% of them were reproductively active, either lactating and or pregnant. And so the idea, we think, is like, well, if you can catch one giant fish instead of 200 small ones or whatever it is, that seems like maybe it's a good bet. But not if you die, and if you're pregnant and lactating, that means you're taking out 3 animals.
Yeah.
Very risky strategy, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really risky behavior.
Yeah, and so it's not really a problem if there's only a few that this is happening to, but if it becomes more of an issue, and most of there's only one or two that were like salmon. The rest of these it's American shad. That's the one that they're choking on,
right?
Particularly in the outer coast. So we don't have any here in the Salish Sea that we've documented with American shad, but that's along the coastline on the outer edge. So again, it's like, and American shad are native in the Atlantic, and so are porpoises. As far as we know, we're still trying to look into that, but as far as we know, there's no documentation of them choking on them over there. So is it like, since they evolved to be together over there, maybe they figured out a while ago that you're trying to eat those, and they're trying to do it now here? Like, that's the question.
Just when they're small.
Yeah, right. Like, do it when the smaller guys, like, your eyes are too big for your stomach. You cannot do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so then the story doesn't even end there, because then 2 years later, we started seeing eagles, bald eagles, trying to and successfully taking the salmon when the porpoises were chasing it. So bald eagles that's called kleptoparasitism. So they're really good kleptoparasites. They steal from other birds. Yeah. But usually other birds. I think the only other mammal that they steal from was river otters that we could find in the literature. Mm-hmm. And so I have this is one of my favorite pictures. The picture of a bald eagle about 2 feet above a harbor porpoise with the salmon in its talons that it just took from the fish.
That eagle just saved your life, Harbour Porpoise.
Right, exactly.
Can you imagine the frustration of the porpoise? Like, I worked so hard to do that. So we documented that, and then we also saw them doing it with seals, trying to take, the seals were chasing stuff. And then we had a community scientist that we had put that information out in our newsletter one time, like, this is interesting that we saw this. And somebody was like, oh, I saw this with orcas. There was a bald eagle that dove into a pod of big killer whales who were eating a seal and grabbed a chunk of seal meat and survived.
Oh my god!
Damn.
The balls on that
Talk
eagle.
about risky behavior.
Jesus.
Like, you think that you can okay, that's good on you, sir. Wow. So, but we think that may be a new behavior for the eagles because this is a new behavior for the porpoises. You know, we don't know. It's possible that we've missed them doing this forever, but again, not any diet studies either. So, but it's likely like, oh, well, that fish is worth me taking the energy to try to take from you.
Yeah. Especially from a harbor porpoise. What's it going to do to you?
Did you see, I think it was like a golden eagle, but there was over in Europe somewhere, and there's a video of this eagle trying to take a harbor porpoise baby, like neonate, from the water.
Wow.
Oh my god.
I was like,
jeez.
That's...
what? But he couldn't lift it out of the water. Like, he couldn't. Right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Nature is wild, and that's what I love.
I think
you never know.
You guys and your team have such a unique perspective because you're out there so consistently and so regularly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. We used to have lots of boring field days, but then you're out there for when crazy stuff happens.
Yeah, I was having that conversation actually with one of our volunteers the other day out in the field, and we were talking about, just the challenges with funding long-term research. And I'm like, but this is the value right here, is that you get to learn all these things that you would never even think to look for because we didn't know was behavior. These are not things that we ever would have found out if we weren't sitting out there, 2 to 4 times a week all year round. Yeah.
And our study site is unique because we don't have to be on a boat. We don't have to worry about their behavior around boats. Like, we just sit on a rock and they come in. And so it's a really great natural way to just observe what they naturally do and get to be privy to that, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So harbor porpoises are super cool.
I agree. Do we want to talk a little bit about seals? I know.
Yes. Slip them in.
Just right? Sneak them in
Just
just a little bit.
Only a little bit.
Yeah.
To put a warning on this podcast.
Warning,
contains
alert.
pinnipeds.
Sorry, whale friends, but I like seals.
Seals are
They
cool
are
too.
Yeah.
Yes. So we do basically the same thing that we do with harbor porpoises. We just do with harbor seals, and you can identify them by their seal, by the seal. You can identify them. The pelage pattern, so the spotting pattern that they have, is unique, and it remains stable. Although we've seen some interesting changes over the years that could make it easy to miss a match over longer periods. Our resident seal expert is our research assistant Sierra Edison, and she spent far too many hours staring at seal heads and matching them.
Boy.
But we published a paper last year about the site fidelity of harbor seals, and so we have that one was from 2015 to 2019, I think, was the time frame.
I believe so.
And showing basically the same thing, that we do have animals that stay here, that are here all the time, and then we have others that we see once, right? So same thing with porpoises. Some we only see once, some we see a lot. We are likely underrepresenting the site fidelity of the harbor porpoises because there's lots of times we don't get photos that are good for ID, right? That's one of the caveats. But the same thing for seals too, but we have about 20 to 25 that are this is their place. They're going to be here, and they're here all the time, and they love it. And then we have 20 to 25 that are seasonal, and sometimes you only see them in spring. They're coming here for spring or fall or whatever season they like. And some are kind of haphazard. And then over 200 of them we've seen once. And so harbor seals, I think that harbor seals are everything they do is individual. What do they eat? What their preferences are? Where do they go? Where do they haul out? Where are they in water? What they're doing is completely by individual. So it's interesting to try to, you can't be oh, all seals do this. No, they don't. they're very independent, I have to say. But we were one of the first ones that we know of to do ID in the water. So most of the time when you are looking at harbor seals or photo ID is done, it's all on haul outs. But they're in the water like 70-80% of the time. Yeah. So we know very little about the behavior of in-water seals. So when they're just out and about.
I guess they just sit there with their head above water, waiting for you to take a picture of them. So
well, some of them do, and then as soon as you get the camera up, they just go and they sit down. But we get to, they do some cool stuff. We've seen them eat octopus. I've heard one, I think, almost choke on one, but then he managed to get it down. Oh. Yeah, it was pretty. I saw him, like, he was eating something, and then all of a sudden I just heard, like, like, I think he's having some problems, but then managed to figure it out. And Kat actually saw, I think we saw mating in the water one time. Kat was out for that one. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty neat, pretty close to shore as well. So unfortunately nobody else was there, but I did get pictures. So
yeah, it did happen. Like, sure, Kat, sure, you saw it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And then we've also showed that they have large grouping behavior. So normally what we think harbor seals are lone out on the water. Like they're by themselves. They don't really group up. But in our field site in particular, during May, for the last few years, they will be out anywhere from like 4 or 5 individuals to like a group of 50 that just are all together and they're just floating through the pass. And it looks like they're foraging, right? So they're going belly up and then swimming around, and birds are coming down to try to fish. So we don't know if it has something to do with a spawning event or some kind of crazy. But it's almost like clockwork. Like beginning of May, okay, we're gonna do that, and then end of May, and we're done. So
that's a lot of seals.
No. Yeah.
We were walking out of the field, and I think I still have the video. I do saw the video somewhere, but I'm taking it with the camera, and I was like, "What are you guys doing? You're not supposed to do this." I don't understand.
Yeah.
So again, really cool things you can see just by happening, staying out there and observing the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's really
harbor
cool.
seals are individuals too.
Oh, look at that.
Mm-hmm. We have one named Calypso that is a prolific hunter and loves to share and show his show and tell. It's bring it right up, the fish right up to us, and like, look what I caught. They're pretty funny.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us before we move on to our segments? Harbour Porpoises, super cool. Anything else?
I think I was looking through my slides, and that's like the main points that we wanted to talk about, I think. Kat, did you have anything else?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we've kind of already made one of the main points, which is just the importance of that long-term monitoring, right? Like I said, this is something that really doesn't get a lot of press. It's not flashy. It's not super exciting necessarily on the surface of it to say that you're going out every day to look at the same thing every day. But this is really where a lot of this really important information comes from. And there's so much that we've learned about these guys that we didn't know, that we never would have found out had we not been doing that long-term monitoring. So I think that just deserves like a little bit, like a moment to just appreciate. Yeah, just really appreciate the importance of that for any species, but especially ones that we don't really know much about how they live.
Yeah, and they're such integral parts of the ecosystem, right? It's they're keeping the ecosystem healthy, and are important parts of it. So they deserve to be known about and learned them. And they're super cool.
Yeah.
Before we continue with the rest of the episode, we want to take a moment to tell you about how you can support our podcast and everything we do at Whale Tales.
You can join us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/whaletales. For $1 a month, you can join at the porpoise level, for $5 a month at the dolphin level, or $10 a month and be a whale level patron.
And each level comes with a variety of different perks, including the ability to vote in our polls, thank you postcards from us, access to extended interviews or extra stories that our guests share with us, and you can produce your own Fun Flipper Fact segment of the pod. We also have 2 additional podcasts for patrons. So if you like having our voices in your ears, then you can have more. Our dolphin and whale level patrons get access to our every 2-month-ish, we kind of do it on a rotation. So what's called Journal Club, where we read a scientific article and then we talk about it, which is super, super fun. And then our whale level patrons have access to an extra podcast called Whale Tales Watches, where we watch a thing and then we talk about it, usually rip it to shreds, and then we rate it on an accuracy scale. And we had a really good one that we did not tear to shreds that just came out last week. If you would like to listen to our thoughts on Dana,
Scaricello! Thank you so much to all of our patrons. You are very, very amazing, and we love you so much.
Indeed. But if you aren't able to support us financially, there are still lots of things you can do to help us out. You can leave us a rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice, or you can even leave us a comment on Spotify. So random. This will also help other people find us, and you might as well just tell all your cetacean science podcast loving friends about the podcast and everything we do at Whale Tales so that they can join in too.
You can also follow us on social media at whaletales_org, and you can send us your feedback so that we can keep making the podcast even better.
All right, Nick, take it away.
It's time for Fun Flipper Facts. That is the time where we ask you to share your favorite fact. It doesn't have to be about Harbour porpoises. It can be,
Okay.
but it doesn't have to be. It's just your favorite fun fact about a cetacean. Now, you have shared quite a lot already.
I think I've spilled all my secrets. I've spilled all my fun facts. Have you ever had anybody on, like, of how to sex a dolphin? Or, like, talk about how to sex a dolphin?
Not
Yeah, I
specific.
think we've talked about
I don't
it,
think
but
so.
not as a fun fact, for sure.
Okay.
No, definitely not.
I like to share this one because I would like to say, like, oh, okay, here's one you can randomly share at your next party because obviously this is going to be real, real popular.
Well, if it was like a party with
Right,
us,
it would be
then, yeah.
spot on. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So and this of course varies with some species. It's not all exactly clean, but especially for like dolphins, small cetaceans. When you're looking at the belly, right, the females have like a long slit that's the urogenital slit and the anal slit, like kind of together, and then you have two mammary slits, one on each side, and then but for males you have the one urogenital slit, and then you have a little space, and then you have the anal slit, and so basically what it means is that females have a division sign, and males have an exclamation point, which makes total sense.
Yes, it does.
Perfect.
Love that. Thank you.
Yep, I like it.
So now you know how to sex a dolphin, and you can tell all your
Hooray!
Now you just
Something
need
you
them
never
to
knew you
didn't know
cooperate
you
and
needed.
show you their ventral side.
And show
Well,
you.
so that would be
Yeah.
great because Harbour Porpoise, we don't know the sexes of all, especially the males, because you can only, you can see it with their calves, so you know that's a female, presumed, and then occasionally
and
we
the
can get
rest.
the male when he comes out of the water, but it's really hard to get good ID shots when he's flailing like that. So it's a bit more difficult to sex these guys.
Not surprising. Not surprising.
Yeah. In the Bahamas, they didn't care. They would swim right up and be like, look at my belly, I'm a male. It's great.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Also, clear water.
Well,
Also very helpful in that kind of
yes.
situation.
Yeah. The fact that they don't disappear after about 2 feet is fantastic.
Yep. And they're not, well, I guess it depends on the dolphin species. So those porpoises are just gray, blending in with gray everywhere in the fall. Salish Sea.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Kat, do you have a fun flipper fact?
Ooh, well, I feel like mine is not going to be new for anybody listening to this podcast. The one fact that I always end up sharing with people, that especially those who don't know anything about cetaceans, is the fact that they can rest one hemisphere of their brain at a time in order to sleep. That I remember learning that for a talk that I gave when I was in primary school. I grew up in the UK, so I went to primary school versus grade school, but I was in like primary 5, which is like 4th grade, and gave a talk on dolphins because I was going to be a dolphin biologist. And I learned that fun fact, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So that's one that a surprising number of people still don't know. So I love to share that one with everybody.
It's a good one. It is a really good one.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen when like they're resting like that and they're sleeping? There's like rhythmically like, and sometimes close an eye.
Yeah. Lindsay and I saw gray whales sleeping a lot when we were in Oregon last year.
Oh wow.
So I wonder with porpoises, like, okay, so they must have to do it too, but they're always going. Like they have.
Yeah.
So another fun fact is that harbor porpoises have such a high metabolism and they live in cold waters that if they're already not doing very well, they can starve in as little as 3 days.
Wow.
They cannot last for as long as other cetaceans can without food. So that's another reason why, like, okay, maybe taking a giant salmon is worth the risk.
Yeah. So,
and another reason why it's so important to know where they feed, because they have to have predictable food sources. Otherwise, you're spending too much energy searching and not getting enough food. Yeah,
That's
so. When do they sleep? I don't know. Really short cat naps.
okay, too many facts. Need to focus on.
We'll tell you more than you ever wanted to know about harbor porpoises. Right there. There you go.
And it's the title of the episode. Okay, so now we're here for the reason for the season, whale tales. If you'd like to share a cetacean encounter, again, harbor porpoise or any other species, any time in your life that was memorable, cool, special, unique, all of those things.
So this one, I was like, oh my God, I have to choose one? Okay. So this is going to be difficult. And I'm going to veer away from the porpoises for a minute because we've talked about them a lot and they have a lot of cool things. And I think I've already told about all the cool stuff that we've seen there. But in the Bahamas, so we studied spotted and bottlenose dolphins in the Bahamas. And we would sometimes have interspecies interactions, and lots of times those were a bit tense, shall we say. But sometimes there would be some playful ones or whatever. And so they play this game called sargassum tag. And so they would take a piece of sargassum and they would take it and put it in their mouth and then carry it around. And if you, as ages me, but like hacky sack, right? You just hit the ball with your legs and you're doing all crazy things. They can do that with the sargassum. So they'll like bump it up and it's on their dorsal fin, and they'll pop it off and it's on their fluke. And they're just like, I know exactly where this is in space. And it's pretty awesome. So they play this tag, but the rules are that you cannot take the sargassum from the dolphin, either a human or another dolphin or whatever. Like the dolphin has to drop it and then the next player can play. And so there was this young bottlenose dolphin that was playing with these spotteds, and he was, I don't know if he was upset by the rules or what, but he finally got the sargassum, and so he was swimming around, and then he just went, and he ate it. And I was like, what? It was almost like a toddler being like, well, if I can't have it, then no one can. And ate it. And, we don't know that I've never seen a dolphin eat sargassum before. So
probably had an interesting rest of his day.
It's like that either really helped push things through or gave him some indigestion. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, he's like super dolphin now because he figured out the
he ate his weeds or his spinach. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of my favorite.
That's really fun.
Very cool.
Kat, do you have one?
I do. So when I worked in Australia for a little while studying the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins out there. And one of the things that they find out there is that there's a lot of shark attacks on the dolphins, right? So a lot of the animals have scarring and have nicks and notches from shark attacks because you're in Western Australia. So there's a high rate of sharks out there. And when I started working out there, we had a female with a new calf, and we were all excited on the boat, like, oh my gosh, this is a new calf, how exciting. We knew the female. And so we saw it in a couple of transects, and then all of a sudden it was gone. And we didn't see the calf, and we're like, oh my gosh, okay, probably wonder if something happened to it. And this is a really like a resident female, so we would see her a lot. And we didn't see the female either. And so we're like, oh my gosh, something happened to them. And so as we were wrapping up our time out there, we were all going around in a circle, and each one of us was like, well, what would you like to see what would be ideal for you to see on your last day on doing field work? And mine was to see fence and her calf. And lo and behold, the last day of field work on our last transect loop, and we saw her with the calf, and the calf had a massive gash on its dorsal fin, but it was healing. It was already healing, and it was swimming around just fine, and the mom was right there. And so it looked like it had been attacked by a shark, but it had survived. So that was just a really cool moment of like full circle moment. Like it was one of the first surveys that I ever did that I got to see them with the new calf, and then turned out it was alive. So that was just a really nice way to end the whole time out there.
That's lovely.
That's awesome.
Were you in Shark Bay?
No, I was in Bunbury, so a little farther north.
I was there.
Oh, really? Oh, fun.
I haven't thought about that in a really long time, but I did a study in Bunbury for 6 weeks.
Oh, that's small world. I love it.
The marine mammal world is a very
Agreed.
small one, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just the cutest little town. Like, just loved it so much.
Oh, it's super cute.
Well,
Yeah,
it has
it
a
is
super
super
cute
cute.
name. I mean, like Bunbury.
Great name.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's adorable.
Very fun. Yeah. Very fun. Before we wrap up, we always like to leave our listeners with something that they can do to help support the cetaceans and seals, I guess, in their oceans and just the oceans around them. So if you have any calls to action or activities that our listeners could do or keep in mind, would be great to share.
Well, I mean, I think one thing is that talking to your legislatures and telling them what you want, because there's a lot of things that are right now that are trying to go through that are not great, and the public has the public has power, right? In telling them, hey, this is not okay. Like a lot of the things that we've done to make things better is because the public has said this is not acceptable and we don't want to do it. So as much as you can do that, writing, letters, or there's a lot of times when the legislation comes out and it's like call to action, and you can just go click a button and say I agree with that or I don't agree with it. At least to have your voice heard is really important, and then just spreading the word too. Honestly, like if nothing else, you can tell everybody how cool Harbour Porpoises are, for example.
Yeah,
and spread the word on that and the work that many people are doing on cetaceans here in the Salish Sea, and to help support that.
Show off how Harbour Porpoise is made at your next party, because that.
I mean, if you want to get people interested,
true.
that's the way to do it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Kat, did you have anything to add to that?
I think the only thing I was going to add is that if anyone listening is interested in supporting our work directly, you can just go to our website. We are very happy to accept donations. We are a very small nonprofit, and so all of this work obviously takes a lot of time and effort and energy, and we're really fortunate to have a very involved community around us, which is amazing. But any additional help is always welcome. So you can head over to our website and learn more there, and if you feel so inclined, donations are very, very welcome.
And we have volunteer opportunities. So we have volunteering, internships, community science. We have a couple different programs. We have over 130 community scientists, interns, and volunteers that come out and help us do our work. And it is a community effort to get this done. There's a lot of data to go through. There's a lot of field work to do, and we couldn't do it without the help of our community. So we really appreciate that. And it's a fun way to get involved with the work, right? You can come out and help us observe, hopefully, porpoise mating at some point.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you both so much for coming on here and basically blowing our minds about Harbour Porpoises. I know way more now.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
And that's thank you for having us. That's what we want to do. We're the big supporters of the small little guys that nobody knows about, but are our neighbors in the backyard. So happy to be able to share with everybody how cool they are and blow some minds at the same time.
Awesome.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode or any episode of our podcast, so please visit our website, whale-tales.org, and find links to all of our social media handles so that you can drop us a line.
You can find PacMam all over the internet. You can go to their website, pacmam.org, PACMAM, and also on socials. They're Pacific Mammal Research. At most places, they're on PacMam on Blue Sky. You can find Kat at kittycat25 with K's in there, and you can also find Cindy on LinkedIn at Cindy Elliser, and we'll put all of those links in the show notes.
If you want to follow along with what we're doing at Whale Tales, you can head over to our website to subscribe to the podcast, learn about supporting us and becoming a patron, and check out over 1,500 whale, dolphin, and porpoise stories.
That's whale-tales.org. Tales like the stories, not tales like the animals.
And if you've seen a cetacean, we would love to add your story to our library. You can click the share link on our website. You can contact us on social media. We're at whaletales_org. Or you can email us a voice memo and tell us all about your incredible cetacean encounter.
Finally, we want to acknowledge that we recorded today's episode on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples and the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Skianu, and Wisanic nations. And this is a message from Cindy and Kat. Our research is conducted on the traditional lands of the Samish Indian Nation people, past and present. Our work and programs may occur outside of this region, and we honor all Indigenous peoples, including the Sklallam, Coast Salish, Lumi, Tulalip, Swinomish, Stillaguamish, Skagit, Lekwungen, Songhees, and Timok.
Thanks everybody so much, and we hope you have a really great day.